will the next 12 months look like the last 12 months? And I think, we can all agree that there's been a lot of upheaval in so many aspects of our lives. And, in addition to that, the last 12 months have posed challenges in the workplace. So, this question becomes, what have we learned from the change that's been required by the last 12 months, and how are we going to apply this to the future? So I'd like to welcome the panelists today. So we have Steve Cooper from NextUp Solutions and Acceleration, Annissa Deshpande from Loglab, Sue Keith from Ceres Talent, and myself. I'll play moderator here. So first, what I'd love everybody to do here is just introduce yourself and what you do. And then in addition, one question, what's a unique challenge that either you've solved for your own company, or if you're a consultant that you've helped companies solve over the last 12 months. And we'll start with Annissa.
Okay, well, thank you, Greg. It's great to be here. I am Annissa Deshpande. I'm a modern HR advisor. And so what that means is I help emerging growth and investor-backed companies modernize their HR by providing guidance, strategic guidance to the CEOs or fractional chief people officer services. I also provide coaching to HR professionals to develop their strategic acumen. And I publish content, either videos, or I just published a book on modern HR and how companies can apply it. It's actually a novel if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And so something that I've done that's unique over the last 12 months, I would say this is, I'm sure you've heard this theme over and over today. It's really an unprecedented time. And so one of the things we quickly jumped on was the need to define culture. And I think a lot of my clients had thought about culture, had maybe defined it loosely. We had values, but really getting into how do we operate? How do we think about things? If I'm a new person coming in, how do I get up to speed in a distributed environment? And so I built a culture guide template with a workbook, and I had all my clients go through it. And not only did it lead to some really effective conversations for them as to, how they should be thinking about their culture, it also led to a great document for the existing workforce and anybody new that we had joining to get up to speed on how the company operated very quickly.
Great. Steve, how about you?
Sure. Thanks, Greg. It's great to be here. I'm Steve Cooper from NextUp Solutions and Acceleration. We, NextUp does two things. One is we help teams, organizations, and individuals work better together, become more productive, raise morale, and produce better results through Agile, through Scrum methodologies, through Kanban. So we offer a lot of training to groups, individuals, and companies. Right here in Arlington and worldwide now that everything is remote. We are helping train folks everywhere from Belgium to South Africa. Acceleration is a very unique software engineering center because we have experts and we also tap into the talent that's available in the college market. So undergraduate software engineers are harnessed on our projects to serve our clients, and we build technology solutions most often, and this kind of pivots into your question here, what is the challenge that we've helped companies solve over the last 12 months? We've found a way to give startups who previously had no way to access technology talent, because as you know, there's millions of vacancies already in software engineering, and startups, now it's phenomenal, but startups have great access to capital now through grants, loans, investments. They don't have great access to software talent. So they can get a $500,000 loan. What they can't do is spend it on software until now. And that's why we started Acceleration. We are now enabling lots of startups to harness the energy of college-fueled, expert mentored teams to build their MVPs, their minimal viable products out there for to bring them to market and please their customers.
Wonderful. Sue.
Hi there, everybody. Thanks for having me. Steve, that's really cool stuff. I want to talk about that at another point. I am Sue Keith. I'm a partner with Ceres Talent. We are a marketing recruiting firm, been around about 15 years in the DC area. The reason we specialize in marketing and call it marketing and marketing related positions is everyone on our team spent the majority of our careers in marketing before we took this interesting, call it a stumble into recruiting. And so we like to say we speak the language, at least the marketing language, and are pretty good at the matchmaking, which is essentially what we do for a living. Answer your question, Greg, about the last 12 months. March of 2020, we saw headcount come to openings come to a screeching halt. So what we spent a lot of time, fortunately, we're diversified. In fact, in that we supply contract interim marketing managers as well as full-time placements. So we helped our clients shift from thinking they were going to hire some full-time folks to bringing in some interim folks, because as everyone knows, it's two different budget buckets. So that they needed the work to get done. So we were able to do that. The other thing we did is someone went from thinking they were going to hire 5 people the next couple of months down to 1. We helped them prioritize what that 1 should be. And interestingly enough, same thing happening now. Now the job market's exploded and they want to hire. We have a client right now going from 4 to 19 people on the marketing team. So we're helping our clients think through prioritizations in terms of, you can't do that in, a couple of weeks. So what are the most critical first hires, and what are the ones you can layer in, later on?
Wonderful. Well, I've got a few questions for everyone here. So first, I'll start with a topic about workplace culture. So while many believe that creativity and innovation happens in the between moments, so when you're walking to the water cooler or grabbing a cup of coffee or something like that, that's not always the case. So, how do you foster innovation in a remote or hybrid work environment and maximize the different ways that people are working? And we'll start with Annissa.
Okay, I think it's a great question. And I think I would start with the fact that there's no one way to foster innovation. And a lot of it depends on what it is you're trying to do. So, I think it's very different to optimize something like the iPhone versus coming up with the concept of the iPhone. So if you're trying to do a lot of what I'll call more moonshot type innovation, you probably need to think about how you cultivate, how you create opportunities for people to have freedom. And if you think about, for example, Google, right? When they think about innovation, what do they say? Everyone says that, and I don't know that this is entirely true, but they allow their employees 20% of their time to work on whatever they want to work on. Now, they're not dictating that should be in the office or that should be on their own. And I think highly creative people often need space to come up with those moonshot ideas. And so if you're trying to break into something that's completely unique or change or disrupt something, then innovation may look very different. If you're trying to optimize existing products and maybe do some more product enhancements or work on something that, or take a product that you have and maybe take it in a different direction or open it, or maybe think about it for a different market, I think you do need a lot more collaboration. In those cases, you may need to think about more of a hybrid environment. But I think the thing is there's no one size fits all, right? We really need to be thoughtful about what it is we're trying to achieve. And I know some of this was mentioned in the last panel, where you look at companies that are being really prescriptive of, you have to be in the office 3 times a week. It's not really, to me, what we should be trying to do is come up with a compelling why. What is the reason you need to be in the office or that you need flexibility? You've got to figure that out for yourself. And you can't get caught up in this mania that the media has around everyone, is saying this about returning to work, or WeWork saying this, or Apple saying this, or, Jamie Dimon saying this. You've got to figure out what makes sense for your particular company and what it is you're trying to achieve. And then if you decide that you want to continue in a remote environment and it makes sense, but you still need some of those intentional or some of those informal connections, you can be intentional, but still informal. And there's a lot of apps out there that support it. So if you're using Slack, for example, some of my clients have deployed Donut, which is an app that matches random people in a company together to get to know them over coffee for 20 minutes. And so that's another way that you can foster some of those informal connections to lead to different innovative conversations.
That's great. Steve, what are your thoughts about fostering innovation in a remote world?
Well, when you think about innovation and creativity, often people go to the concept of new ideas. We want new ideas, and as Annissa mentioned, Google, asking its employees or spurring its employees to spend, a percentage of their time on new ideas. For every new idea that's launched, it takes 200,000 or 300,000 hours to actually execute it and get it delivered. So you really want to reward not just new ideas out of the blue sky, because it's hard to reorient a company around a new idea every day or even every year. What you want are new ideas to improve what you're already doing, to improve the mission that you're already doing. And so first, I would start with an engaging mission, making sure that the mission is engaged and people are engaged with it and feel connected to it and feel inspired to want to improve it. And that's where the real golden ideas come from, is not just, hey, let's come out with a flying car, but hey, let's take what we're already doing and change this or change this about the customer experience. Those ideas are really important. And one way to do that remotely is that you can continue to execute best practices like you see in Agile or Scrum, where you're going to do a retrospective on how did we do last week or how did we do on this particular initiative, and get everybody in the room making sure that they talk about the pluses, the minuses, what we could do better, and what maybe we should start doing and what we should stop doing, and make sure you hear from all corners. And those type of practices, which can be done remotely or in person, really can create an environment where all ideas and all seeds get planted. And those things, again, they don't have to just be done in the conference room. It used to be that way. Now there are tools online and techniques that let you do those things even remotely.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and definitely, I'm a fan of the agile, the agile approach to things.
Yeah,
definitely agree. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and to another topic, talent acquisition. So, Sue, I'll give you this question first. I think we can all agree that the hiring market is tough right now. Yet, companies are sticking to the old ways of interviewing and hiring talent, getting to the 8th or 9th interview in some cases. I know many people that have been through that, and we were talking about this the other day as we were prepping for this. How can companies be more agile in their hiring approach and still get the best talent?
Yeah, you're preaching the choir there with this. We're not quite sure what's happened over the last few years, where it used to be that, and this is un-COVID related, if that's a adjective.
You coined it now, so.
I have now un-COVID related. We've moved from, interviewing with 2 to 3 of the key people to 10 people. And I'm not exaggerating. I just booked, I think 5, 3, like the 11th interview for one of our candidates. And, we're not quite sure why that's happened to be. Now, granted, we absolutely recognize that having a new hire have the buy-in from some of the key people they'll be working with is, accelerates onboarding. It just makes everything go a little bit faster, a little bit smoother. We get that, but I'm not sure you need 10 people. And, we're calling it our public service announcement as we're talking to clients right now, given this just insane job seekers market. We're saying, if you like a candidate, move quickly. Because if you don't, I promise you, there are 2 to 3 other companies who may be about to give them an offer. We just lost a candidate to this last week. But I don't think they're hearing us because these extended interviews are still happening, no matter how often we say it. So, our recommendations are, figure out who are the most important people and keep it into a very short list. Who are the most important people? If you're looking for cultural fit, that's an important piece. So who will they be most working with? And there also may be someone in the company who's almost like the corporate culture ambassador, if you will, someone who's just a really good advocate for the company and also just a good judge of cultural fit. You'll see that occasionally where a client will ask them a candidate to meet with someone who's not necessarily in their direct sphere of where they'll be working, but they appreciate that employee's take on culture and how they embody the culture. So we get that. And so the other thing I'd say is just trust your hiring gut. You know, when I used to hire folks, it was a combination of your gut reaction to spending some time with that person. Do they have the skill set you're looking for? But would you want to work with this person 8 hours a day? You know, have a couple other key people talk to them. Obviously do reference checks, which, you know, have their, you know, with a grain of salt, but you can actually find out some really interesting things through reference checks. And then just go for it, especially in this market. And the other thing I'd say is, well, two other things I'd say. One is, you know, perhaps you can try to talk to your HR management teams about what is currently your standard company standard hiring process, and see if you can advocate for, at least in this environment, changing that or truncating it so that everyone is in agreement that this is how the interview process is going to go. So you're not trying to, after the fact, as you bring someone in and you want to make the offer and you're still trying to go through 6 more interviews. See if you can, you know, advocate up to just say, could we approach this a little bit differently? And here's my plan. The other thing I want to mention, and this is on the candidate side, even though we're mostly working remotely, a lot of people still have fairly structured work days. And when you ask someone to go through 10 45-minute, hour-long interviews, they are taking time off. Some of them, you know, some of our candidates are actually taking PTO, or they're on their 17th, you know, doctor's appointment, which either they're really ill or people are going to figure out they're interviewing. So just have some respect for what you're asking on the candidates side. It's a real burden to put them through too many interviews. Again, I agree that a certain number is necessary to make sure that it is the right fit for your company. But I think it's gotten a little out of control.
Yeah. Annissa, what are your thoughts about navigating this hiring market?
Yeah, it's a crazy time, like Sue said. And so the advice that I give my clients is to be as thoughtful about acquiring employees as you are about customers. And it's a skill set that they already have, typically, if they're successful, right? They know how to go out and get customers. They're super thoughtful of it. So now they just need to hone that skill, build that muscle, or tone that muscle to go after employees. And so, you know, I think the one thing I do ask them to think about is develop that unique candidate experience that, you know, and Sue touched on this too, that makes the most of the candidate's time. Be super respectful of their time. Have a defined and engaging interview process. So if you are going to have 9 interviews, right, and sometimes we're just not going to be able to talk companies out of it, explain why and show them how that's going to progress, and then let them know that they're going to get feedback in 24 hours or come up with whatever the right service level agreement is. And then when you do a go or no go decision, be thoughtful, give them feedback as to why they're not moving ahead, so that, you know, they get something out of this experience versus just interviewing with you. And a couple of things that I've been experimenting with, one is to send questions out in advance, the questions that are going to be part of the interview process. It can either be sample questions or the actual ones. And by letting candidates prepare, I find that the discussions are much richer when they actually come to the table. And then I think the other thing that, and I also think it helps when you're trying to diversify your workforce, just, you know, giving people, we're not a gotcha culture. We want you to come prepared. We want you to be relaxed. We want to really hear what you have to say. The other thing that I've been experimenting with in this market, right? Because a lot of it is marketing. It's no different than when you're trying to sell your house in a competitive market or buy a house in a competitive market. You need to have the right marketing materials. And so one of the things that I've been doing with my clients is helping them come up with a candidate success guide. And this equips the candidate with all the information that they need to know to be successful in the interview process, and it preps them for it. So it goes through what that experience is, how we're going to be respectful of their time, what the interview process looks like, the values of the company, the culture of the company. And it really removes what I call those gotcha moments, which I think, you know, as companies continue to evolve, as cultures continue to evolve, there's less and less tolerance of that. And it shows that you've thought through the process and that you want to make the most of their time. So if you know that your life cycle to close a customer is 30 days, you should have a similar metric for your life cycle to close a candidate and to get them on board.
I would, Annissa, that's an excellent point. And it made me think of two other things is there's still a thinking that the candidate, it's solely a one-way transaction that's occurring, that the candidate has to sell the various members of the interview team. It should never be that way. It really needs to be thought of as a two-way transaction. Are we as a company selling ourselves to this candidate if we think they're a strong potential? But especially in this market where there are candidates have choices, to be really super cognizant of the fact that you're selling, you got to sell the company to the candidate. And it's another point I wanted to make about, because this just happened too. There is a risk when you put a candidate you really like in front of X number of people. Every new person that candidate meets with could possibly be a turnoff. So we just had a candidate get through several rounds of interviews, went through what should have been the second to final. And the client came back and said, yep, we want to move all the way to, let's meet with the CEO. We're pretty sold. My candidate came back and said, after that conversation, you couldn't pay me enough to work with that company or work with that particular person. And it was because that interviewer said some things that made our candidate question the culture of the company. So that's not going to happen every time, but it is a factor to keep in mind, that don't throw too many people at your candidate, and be really thoughtful about who you have them meet with. So certain people are just unavoidable. If you're going to work very closely with some other key stakeholder, then that conversation has to happen. The other thing I wanted to say, and again, Annissa prompted this, is please don't ghost your candidates. Again, not a COVID issue. It's been going on as long as I've been in this business. I can't tell you the number of people who've come to us and told us, story after story of having been through interview round 3, 4, 5. I met with the CEO, I met with the senior executive team, and I never heard anything again. We recognize that, especially in larger companies are reluctant to provide any sort of feedback beyond we're going in a different direction or you weren't chosen because of some liability concerns, if they give anything that could be perceived as subjective. But at least do the common courtesy of at least telling somebody that you're no longer being considered, even if you're unable to provide additional color commentary to that. But please don't forget that there's a human being behind every resume. And I know, especially in an environment like this, we'll get 100 applications for every position we put out there. But don't forget that these are people behind the resume, and that they deserve at least a minimum level of courtesy during the process.
Great, yeah, appreciate that. Let's get to our last topic here, training and development. So Steve, I'll pass this to you. Just like we were talking about acquisition, retention is also a big issue here. This has been called the Great Resignation, and terms like that have been thrown around. Yeah. One way to retain talent is to make sure they continue to learn and see an upward trajectory for their careers. How do companies provide that? And what's the best way to do this? Has hybrid remote work, has it changed? And what do you see over the next year?
Well, our entire business model revolves around mentoring. And when we had to go remote, we didn't have any choice but to invent a way to do mentoring via remote means. And so we have done that through Zoom. We've done that through Slack, and we've done it with pair programming. Now, obviously, we're in the software development business. So pair programming, there are platforms where you can literally have the mentor on one side of the screen and the mentee on the other, and that development works great. But I have to say, we're a training company, but there's nothing better than actual on-the-job training with real assignments, not training, not classes, not certificates, not mentoring, but giving someone a work assignment, a challenge that may be a stretch for them, an ambitious mission, but that they can do, and then making sure that they're mentored and supported throughout it. That is the crucible for great learning, and it really is the crucible that sparks people's high satisfaction with a job because they see themselves learning. And when you think back, I'm sure everyone listening, ask yourself how you learned what you do best. And the answer is probably not from a class. It's probably from doing it on the job, from a great boss, a great mentor, a great teacher, and doing it, learning it, honing it, failing, but then, taking risks and picking yourself back up. That's the kind of environment and opportunities that folks are looking for. And I know when Annissa and Sue are talking about candidates leaving the process, I don't think employers understand we are in a situation where there are millions and millions of vacancies, more than there are candidates. And so it is a workers market right now, an employees market. And there are always going to be vacant seats out there that employers cannot fill because they aren't competitive. And one way to be competitive is keep the employees you have by making sure you trust them with the missions, even though they may seem like a stretch, they may seem like you're giving them too much to bite off. But a challenging, ambitious mission with a really great boss is something that will keep an employee there. And remember, an employee kept, as Sue and Annissa will tell you, an employee kept is when you don't have to go out and hire. So in this market, you've got to retain the jewels that you have.
Wonderful. Well, I wish we had a little more time here to continue this discussion, but thank you so much to all three of you for joining, and definitely looking forward to continuing this conversation as well.